This is Paul. Yeah. It's 1:09 p.m. And I didn't get any phone calls and I didn't get any emails. I got to thinking of this marriage of Heidi Lee Budnick, Paul Chad Budnick. Yeah. But when you really think about it, what would cause a spouse to not make sure that you get all the actual documentation of the dissolution of marriage? I mean, I would think most spouses would want to make sure. It's kind of like one of those divorces where you're like, well, I'm going to make sure the guy gets it. Now, just looking at it, I decided to Google marriage of, and then there's what's known as the marriage of convenience. Yes. There's a certain amount of fraud involved in a marriage of convenience. And I remember when I was, really dating Heidi, she was going to Peninsula College. Yes. She was just ending a very frustrating relationship with Tim Hodges and had a little girl named Jessica Lee Hodges getting her associate's degree. Oh, now she'd been married twice before, and I understood that at the time of the marriage. Yeah, but I'm a little concerned about what her real motive for marriage was. When a spouse doesn't actually make sure that you have notice of court hearings, doesn't make sure that you get the actual dissolution of marriage, doesn't explain that you were married in Kosovo, yes, and didn't provide quite possibly the marriage certificate itself. I wonder if I'm not a vulnerable adult, maybe a little naive. Now it's difficult to look at me and say, well, it's possible that he did not know. That I was just naive. I didn't really think that anybody would marry me for my money. I mean, I was making a lot of money then, but there's a possibility that I have a lot more money now than I thought that I had then. I mean, I was a financial consultant, wasn't an idiot. But when I look at what happened during the dissolution of marriage, yes. And then the protection orders and all the times that I was arrested for crimes I didn't commit. Are you sure that my wife wasn't involving herself in marriage fraud before we got married? I mean, how a marriage ends, yes, has a lot to do with how it started. Now, my sons, yes, I didn't see that anybody had actually removed the dissolution of marriage or the protection order. Yeah. Now, this, I think, I need to reiterate that I'm the father of five sons that married a woman named Heidi Lee Budnick. Yes. And at that time, she was going through a divorce, had recently completed it, yes, and then had moved to Port Angeles so that she could go to Peninsula College, yeah, because she had a little daughter that was about 3 years old at the time that I first met her, yeah, at the Goodwill in Port Angeles. Oh, and then I met her again at the Albertsons where the SARS is right now. Yeah. Now you can see here there's an actual signature of Heidi Budnick and Paul Budnick. Yes. We signed this while we were living on Guam. Oh. And having five sons, yes, and one non-biological stepdaughter, which let's say the mother's name is Heidi Lee Budnick. Maiden name is Heidi Lee Griggs. And the father's name is Paul Chad Budnick. Here's an actual copy of my signature. Yes. I'm the father of Benjamin Graham Budnick. Yes. And this was filed on September 14th of 2010 on the United States territory of Guam. Right. Now, at the time of the marriage, I would have never believed, yes, that the woman that I loved, right, might have had a family membership that I was never explained to me. Yes, it's kind of like Marilyn Van Proyn. Let's think about Mike's wife for a second. If I looked at the actual start of the marriage where she worked at Everett New Life Center, yes. And Mike had been in the Air Force and then had some sort of injury, yes. He did not intentionally choose a naive person that had no knowledge of the family, that was somewhat timid. I did know her when she was a secretary at Everett New Life Center. He did. And I did know her before she had any children at all. Yes. Now, how a marriage ends has a lot to do with how it started. Yes. See this Heidi Lee Griggs? Yes. This is her actual birth certificate. Her mother's name was June Schaff, Wally Schaff's sister, and her father's name was DeWitt Griggs, and he was born in Alabama. Now he was 48 at the time of the conception, and her mother's age was 36. A 12-year difference between the age of her mother and the age of her father. Now, a lot of people think that's too many years. He's quite a bit older. But there was some questions about Heidi's actual mother, June, that I had met when I was first dating Heidi. Yeah. And it seemed that June had had multiple husbands. She had been married to a kingery. Yeah. Heidi's non-biological half brothers and sisters, yes, Cherie, Lori, and Stephen. And then somehow it didn't work out with the kingery, and she got involved with DeWitt. Now he drank too much. He was, well, somewhat of an alcoholic. Yes. And I never realized there was 12 years difference between the age of DeWitt, yes, and the age of June. Quite a bit of difference. Now, I did know that Heidi had some relatives in Georgia. But when she was very young, her father, DeWitt, died. Yes, and she was raised by her stepfather, another husband of June, that was a ferry captain. He worked in the Washington State ferries. Yes, June did the janitorial service on the ferries. Yeah, and Wild Bill, that's what they called him. As it was explained to me, he died approximately 1 year before our marriage, while she was going through another divorce, while getting involved in myself. It could have been a stressful time, but she did not explain to me the loss of her stepfather. But I did know Jessica's biological father. Pooh. Now, it might have influenced my decision to marry if I had known about the loss of her stepfather. She was very close to him. But she didn't really tell me everything about her personal life. It's kind of like you get involved with somebody. Yes. And she went through a great amount of loss in the death of June Irving's husband. Yes, but I didn't know that until after she had abducted my sons. And you had issued a dissolution of marriage without any actual due process to myself. Now, I did have a lot of time in the last 7.5 years that I spent with myself. Yes, where I did a lot of research. Sure the fuck did. 12 years difference. Now, today, okay, we're going to look at some international documents about marriages of conceit. See, I went online, and when you have that much time to yourself, you'd be surprised. I never realized there was 12 years difference. Now, my phone is on, and I want it to ring.